Hey there, everybody. Welcome to the 440 Guitar Podcast. I am your host today, Jerrell. Thank you so much for tuning up. You can find the podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and anchor.fm/440. Hopefully you don't hear that airplane there too loud. Living in Long Beach, California. Be sure to follow the Instagram at the 440 Guitar Podcast. You can get updates on the episodes coming out. Also just some neat, guitar nerdish fun things on there as well. And if you would like to ask me a question, or potentially if you know of an artist that's really awesome and you'd like to try to connect me to them to kind of share their story in the 440 Guitar Podcast, feel free to either message me on Instagram or send me an email via the 440podcast@gmail.com. So you're more than welcome to do that if you'd like to do so. And today I'm very excited to speak to a very talented artist here. I was connected through the likes of Jen, so shout out to Jen, connecting me with this fantastic artist here. And just to give you a little bit of a background here, I try to do my best on just kind of having people on the show that I've listened to some of the music and have an affinity for it, and really like to have them on the show. And definitely this is one of those folks. So just to give a little bit of a slight brief background here, this artist is an exceptional Los Angeles bass artist, genre fluid, multi-instrumentalist, and has a new album called Kisbee Ring, due out on November 12th. And has played practically every instrument on the record, mixed and produced as well. So needless to say, an incredibly talented person. The 440 Guitar Podcast is excited and honored to have Abby Posner on the show. Abby, how are you doing?
Hey, I'm great. And it is a weird album title. It's kind of a tongue twister. It's Kisbee. Kisbee, yeah. And it actually is a fancy word for lifesaver. That cool orange, the thing that you throw out to sea. It's a fancy little word for that.
Oh, cool. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So how's it been for you this year? I know a lot of people have kind of had a roller coaster ride
yeah,
for this year.
To say the least. A little bit. Yeah. It's been okay. I've continually lean into gratitude because I have, I teach music and I do music full time. I'm able to pick up little freelance gigs here and there. The pandemic started off for me where I was actually scoring music for a film. Wow. I was doing it all remote with my string players, orchestrating everything remotely, and it was just wild. It was like a huge undertaking. So that's how everything started. And then I've been able to maintain teaching online, teaching my private lessons, playing gigs online. And then things started to open up, and it's feeling a little bit better, we're able to tour a little bit now. We're able to play some gigs and get back into the world bit by bit. But it has been just a roller coaster. For sure. Yeah.
So that's good, because it's interesting too. And I've asked the same question to different artists, and they have a different response. A lot of people I've talked to, some people had really struggled picking up and playing the guitar, or playing any music in general, with what they're what they usually do. So it seems like the last 17 months really hasn't stopped you creatively and you as an artist kind of making music.
Yeah, it's really interesting. There were obviously weeks and days where I didn't want to touch an instrument or let alone look at it, which is very challenging because my whole home is painted in instruments. So it's hard to not look at a musical instrument. But then there were days where I just couldn't help myself, and it's like breathing for me. It's less about like, okay, I need to sit down and be a songwriter and like get some stuff out there. It's more like I need to get some of the stuff going on in here out into the world. And that's just how I process a lot of my feelings as well. It's always been that way. Wow. So, I wrote most of Kisbee Ring during the pandemic. And it is all kind of based on urgency and needing help in different ways, like needing to be saved or, so there's a lot of songs about sadness and depression. There's songs about communication breakdowns. There's songs about, Black Lives Matter and the urgency of that movement and how it's, it had an impact on people like me, white folks that just like had a freaking wake up call to do the work. And there's just a lot. There's a lot in there about urgency. Urgency is the kind of the theme. Yeah.
I love that.
Thank you.
So here on the 440 Guitar Podcast, really big on origin stories, how people got to where they are today. And I'm looking forward to hear your origin story. Tell me about your earliest memories in music or of music, as far as what your earliest memory is when it comes to music.
Yeah, so I tell people this a lot. Like my folks are not musicians per se. My mom would play the guitar a little bit around the house and like take lessons, and my dad would just play music all the time. So he's a big like gospel guy and R&B guy and music that comes from the South and the blues. So I would listen to a lot of blues growing up, and I was really inspired actually by that. He's a music historian. He knows so much about the history of music. So that was inspiring to me as a little kid. I would kind of fiddle around on the piano, and then they got me into piano lessons when I was about 5 or 6. And then from there I took guitar lessons from the time that I was about 8 until I went off to college on and off. And then I taught myself instruments along the way. So I taught myself bass and drums and banjo, mandolin. I just kind of kept having that hunger, like that urge to learn more and more and more, and just to pick up something else, like random Turkish instruments or didgeridoo. Like I just I couldn't really stop myself, and it's still hard for me. Like I want to continue to learn how to play everything.
Yeah.
So that's a little bit of my background. Yeah.
Wow. Oh, that's definitely that's a great background to have. Have a parent who's a historian in music and just has a wide variety of types of music that they like to listen to. Yeah. I was curious as far as like to kind of dig a little deeper. Like, was there any particular artist that like motivated you to actually pick up an instrument? Because there's like it makes perfect sense to be an enthusiast, but then another to actually say, hey, I want to try this.
Yes. So I have these early memories of being like, even before piano really, where I was like, picked up a tennis racket to pretend that I was playing guitar. I really wanted to be Jim Morrison and Roger Waters. Like I really loved Roger Waters from Pink Floyd. I think my babysitter got me into Pink Floyd. and she was like, yo, you gotta check this out. And so I would listen to Pink Floyd and be like, I'm gonna be Roger Waters, which is just a really random person for someone to, like a little lady to look up to. And Jim Morrison too, like really not the best role model, but like a pretty sexy dude that I think I wanted to just be like. And so I was really driven by those two. And then I got really into punk rock when I was like in high school. I was listening to Alkaline Trio and like underground kind of punk and ska bands, and I wanted to be a punk star, honestly. When I was really little, I learned a bunch of Green Day songs. Those were my first memories, is like learning that whole album of Dookie. That was just like my favorite record. Yeah. And then I got into like folk music a little bit later, honestly. It was probably when I was like a senior in high school that I got more into acoustic folk and more organic stuff. But I really looked up to these punk guys. Like I just wanted to be a punk guy.
Can you tell me a little bit as far as the process of you actually like learning the instrument? Like, or actually, I guess we'll start on the guitar since you know multiple. But like, did it come across pretty easy for you, or like was it kind of like a challenge? Like, how was that experience?
Yeah, like it came pretty easily, but there were certain things that were really challenging. Like always when you're learning, and this is what I tell my students too, there's always a chord that's like your Achilles heel, you know, like that just gets in the way. And I struggled with that F chord when I was about 9. I remember learning the Counting Crows song, Mr. Jones. And it just, you know, A minor, and then it gets to that F chord, and it was just like, brrr, like everything just like fell apart. Like the strings broke, the glass shattered, all car alarms went off. It's just like that. Yeah, there's always a chord that was challenging, and I moved past that, and then I got really addicted to playing power chords because that was like the punk dude thing, you know, play your power chords. So a lot of the songs that I was writing when I was really young, they were like power chord based. And that was kind of a crutch for a while. I had to really break out of that, you know, to get more into the jazz chords. And that's in college, I started to challenge myself a lot more.
Yeah, that's funny you talk about like the roadblock chords, because I remember that too, just when I was learning. You know, when I started learning the instrument, and yeah, F is definitely that F, especially on an acoustic instrument too, where you're first learning how to you know, bar, and then you're learning how to play that. Because I remember you know, Tracy Chapman's "Give Me a Reason" was like one of my favorite songs growing up. But I'm like, I would love to play this, but it's so painful.
It is painful. I actually just taught that to one of my students like a few months ago, and I think it's an F sharp, so that's it's like all bar chords, you know.
Yeah, I'm like, good lord.
Good lord, he is right. And then, you know, the bar chord thing is a thing that I have to like really coax my students. Like, it's gonna be okay. You're gonna make it through this. And a lot of them just end up, you know, really like, quitting after the bar chords.
Oh man, yeah, those bar chords, man. It's like, wait, like,
yeah,
you
dude.
can play it, just play it a different way, you know. But yeah, sometimes those bar chords
make or break you. They will make or break. Yeah, totally.
Definitely. And then as far as power chords too, it's funny because you know, one of the people I started when I was learning and the super inspired me was Jack White, you know, and he's like, he's like one of my favorite musicians, and just like he kind of helped motivate me to play too, especially with like how he barred chords. Like he used like his pinky finger, like barring the other part and things like that. So that just kind of like resonated with me as well before learning those, you know, those more complex chords. But man, where would we be without without power chords, you know?
My dog just answered that question. He went, nowhere. Murphy, what are you barking at?
You know? It's like a whole decade of music would be gone, you know? The Ramones wouldn't be there. And
say goodbye to the Sex Pistols, the Ramones, say goodbye to like every punk band ever. There would, I know. Where would we be? I mean, they're pretty amazing chords when it comes down to it, especially some of the open tunings that come from it. If you're not just focusing on those 3 strings and you're doing like a full, you know, like on the B area, and you do a full chord, it's just, there's some magic that actually happens with those bar chords.
Definitely.
Or power chords, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And then I guess just talking from like a songwriter's perspective, like, did you have any songwriters that kind of motivated you to write your own songs as well?
Yes, for sure. So I was really started to get more and more into Bob Dylan was always a part of my childhood, and Joni Mitchell, because my parents loved Bob Dylan and Joni Mitchell. But then when I got into my maybe 12 or 13 is when I started listening to Ani DeFranco and started to realize, oh my gosh, she's badass. She's a badass player. She's a badass writer. She's like got a ball of energy. And I was like really almost embarrassingly into like emo. Like I really loved Dashboard Confessional when I was young. I know like all your listeners are going to just turn this off right now. They're going to be like, we don't even want to listen to what she has to say anymore. But like, honestly, there was some really beautiful songwriting that guy did. And I really got into, you know, I went from like punk to emo to folk. And once I got into the folk world, I was really inspired by, you know, Ani and the Indigo Girls, some of these trailblazer women. And now my favorite artist, you know, is Andrew Bird and Bon Iver, and I've been listening to them forever. And I'm like obsessed with what they're doing. I think that it's really fresh and it's like taking folk and just flipping it on its head, and that's what I hope to do. Elliott Smith, Nick Drake, you know, these are some of my favorites. Yeah,
especially for Bon Iver, you know, because I'm a fan of them as well, and how like they've really transitioned just various. I mean, they just kind of threw it in a blender and threw a bunch of other genres in there, you know.
For sure.
You know,
and I love it. Like, I love what he's doing with his, like, vocal like, he built an instrument for his vocal manipulation, and, like, just the sound. It's really like he's a sculptor. Like, I really think of music production as painting and sculpting. And I feel like Justin Vernon from Bon Iver is sculpting something wildly different than anyone else, and that's what I love about
Definitely.
Yeah.
There's a song on, I think it's the self-titled one. It might be it's their second album, called Wash. That song was just like, whoa! Like I just like imagined like a whole film scene. You know, just really painted a picture for me. I was just like, God, like that's so amazing.
It's very orchestrated, you know, and that's what really, it's so inspiring me when someone is really not only just thinking about the song and the lyrics, but like, and he's so poetic, but like also just taking the song structure and kind of being like, fuck it, and like doing something like a orchestration out of the box type of thing, something you don't expect.
Yeah, definitely.
You know,
I was curious to ask you, since, you know, I mean, you have, you know, you talked about as far as learning a bunch of instruments, you know, getting into songwriting from a performance standpoint. Do you remember like your first performance, like singing and playing and things like that? Do you remember that?
Yeah. So I was a big musical theater kid. So I was on the stage from when I was maybe 6. I was doing like, you know, I was in like the Beatles submarine, you know, Yellow Submarine. I was a blue meanie.
Oh, wow.
When I was 6. And like, you know, I got really into musical theater, and then I started performing my own songs when I was about 12 in Denver. And there was a big kind of, I would say, you know, open mic scene, a coffee shop scene happening at that time that I kind of got into. My earliest memory is like playing my first real show at a place called Angie's in Denver, which is no longer there. And that all my friends came from school, and it was a really big deal. I even invited some friends on stage to sing with me. Wow. It was a long time ago. Yeah.
So oh wow, that's interesting. So as far as just kind of the nature of like performing in front of people from a very early age, that just kind of came natural to you. It wasn't really not really a struggle.
No, like I love being on stage. Like I've always been that kind of kid that feels alive on stage. And so that's also why the pandemic was so challenging for me. I was talking to my partner about it, how it just felt like half of me was not existing because I love to perform. It makes me feel so much joy. It makes me feel like a full person. So yeah, that's why. I mean, I've always kind of grew up being on stage, and I've just loved it so much.
Yeah, definitely. So tell me about, so you have an album coming out very soon. Seems like the year's almost over.
Yeah. What is time? What is
like
time?
Tomorrow.
I know. Don't even say that because it's freaking me out. Like there's just so much going on right now. Yeah.
I'm just like, wait, it's October?
Dude, you're telling me it's like October 2032 already. Like,
yeah.
I don't even know what's happening.
Yeah. But tell me about your album that's coming out here in November, the Kisbee Ring, right?
Yeah.
How you pronounce it? Okay.
Yeah, you got it.
Perfect. So tell me about that, as far as just, you know, the writing process around it. Did you have a conceptual nature to like, was it more like approaching for like a concept album? I guess give me a little bit of backstory on it.
Yes, so some of the songs that I was writing for the record came before the album itself, like the concept, right? Like there were a couple tunes that came before the concept, and then I realized as I was constructing the concept that those other older songs would fit in with it that had not been released yet. So, like one of the songs is about what it could be like to be a parent, and like having this whole idea from the start to the finish of what it would be like. And because I've always had like a conflict about being a parent and also having a music career. So that song made it on because I do feel like there's this urgency about that. Again, the theme is urgency and needing to be saved or needing answers, right? So this song really is kind of an answer in itself of like, well, you would probably have a lot of struggles being a parent, and then you would grow to love it, and then you would love it so much that it would break your heart. And so the song's called Fall Apart.
Wow.
But yeah, so it kind of all shaped up to be a big, like the umbrella of the record. It worked for all the songs. I was like, okay, I already had the album cover imagined with me holding the Kisbee Ring. So I like ordered this lifesaver from Amazon, and like it's somewhere in my bathroom right now. But yeah, so it really, once I had the concept in mind, everything just flowed and all the songs just kind of came out, you know?
Wow.
Yeah, it's really cool. There's a song called Wishing Well that's about the urgency of a career and needing to have more success, and how that can be really toxic, that feeling, comparing yourself to people on social media, and how, it's just about, well, why can't we just be in the creative process rather than needing? Oh, I need more. Oh, I need more recognition. So there's a song about that. There's a song about, like I said, depression and anxiety. There's a song called Emergency Use Only, which is about projecting. People projecting their shit onto you, and you kind of being a punching bag in a way. So yeah, it all kind of started to write itself, and it was really a cathartic, healing record for me. It's not just about the pandemic; it's just about kind of healing some parts of myself.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
you're talking about a lot of relatable things,
Yeah.
which I definitely connect with, just even you talking about it, especially when it comes to just the song you talked about as far as the decision between like being a parent or being an artist, and and I feel like for this generation, or even the generation before rather, there's a very self-conscious, I feel like we're more self-conscious as far as like, I don't know if I want to do that. Like being a parent seems like a lot. Like, I don't know if I want to do that and have my career versus, like generations before us where it's like, that's just what you do. Like you have kids and that's it.
You just do it. That's like what the people were told back. It's like, you just do it. You work 2 jobs, you have a baby, you never sleep, and there's no self-care. Well, so long story, to not go too far down this rabbit hole, I am with a woman that I've been with for 3.5 years. And when I met her, the first thing out of her mouth was like, I'm going to be a mom and it's going to happen really soon. She was in the fertility process when we met. And I said, well, I'm not really sure. I'm on the fence about it. I had my whole spiel. And, we dated for 2+ years before she ended up getting pregnant, and we're still together. And
good.
my role in all of this is kind of like a step parent, because we're not technically, I'm not a legal guardian technically, and we're not married, but we're still doing this thing that's very unconventional where I'm here. We don't live together. I have my own studio, and I step in on the weekends, and I get to experience. Like, I was there for the birth. I was up. I've been up at nights changing diapers. Like, I'm getting a taste of what it's like to be a parent. Obviously, and by no means am I in there full time like she is. She's an amazing mom. It's been it's honestly filled my heart up with so much joy to see her as an incredible mother. And it's inspiring, So I think what I'm trying to say is that there's something happening with unconventionality and doing things your own way. And there's no right way to be in a relationship these days. And I think the pandemic, if anything, it taught us, like, what do you want? Like, what do you want your life to look like? How do you want your marriage to look like? How do you want your relationship to look like? It doesn't have to be this, okay, honey, bye-bye, go to work and I'll be with the kids all day, barefoot in the kitchen, making chicken pot pie. You know, like, it doesn't have to look like that. And I think that if we can lean into these unconventional things that were like, whatever that might look like for you, non-monogamy, monogamy, living separately, just leaning into it and being more curious about, like, hey, maybe that actually could work.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. I mean, I'm married. I'm like legally married to my wife, but I totally get it if people don't want to do that. You know, it's like, hey, I don't want the government involved in my love.
And you know, dude, like, for totally, real, a lot of people feel that way. I mean, I am personally, I want to be married. It has nothing to do with like government, legal, this or that, but it's about teamwork and equality. And as I'm a queer person, so as someone that had to fight for marriage equality, it looks really different for me, marriage. It's like really important. So, you know, it's all these things that you have to figure out with your partner, without your partner, as a solo person. How do I want my beautiful, unconventional life to look? Right?
Yeah. Definitely. I wanted to talk to you too about, you know, you said that there's a song about, you know, about Black Lives Matter, and I thought it would. I feel like that's something I really want to touch on, just because being, you know, with the music that you make and the message, you know, being an advocate for that. You know, what was that experience like writing it? Did you kind of get like, you know, certain people that were kind of like, why you have a song about Black Lives Matter? Like, kind of tell me about that. I find that.
Oh, I love it.
I find that interesting. You know,
absolutely. So the song is actually less about Black Lives Matter, and it's more about taking a look at myself as a white person and how I have, and all of us have blind spots, and we have been fed, and you know, we have been fed stories about people of color our entire lives, and systemic racism is in our veins as white people. And so it was more a dissecting this truth of shame, like, oh my God, I have so much shame about my, but also accepting that and going, now it's time to dig deeper and do the work, owning it, owning that I haven't been, as present in the movement as I should have been, owning that I have privilege to check out, owning that, you know, I'm able to just turn off the news and not want to watch it because it makes me uncomfortable. But like, I don't know what it's like to be a person of color, a Black person that walks in the street every single day that that you can't check out. And so it's more, it's called blind spots. It's more owning these things that white people struggle with, and we don't talk about it. I started a group, it's been going on now for about almost 2 years, where I sit down with white women specifically, and we educate ourselves. And we're learning and we're talking about really hard things, because it's our jobs to educate ourselves. You know, it's fucking our job, and quite frankly, I think it's our job to pull the weight now. Like, we need to step in there, and you know, I've been really reflecting on these things, and the first thing is doing the work. It's not just like going out with a frickin' sign that says Black Lives Matter and standing in the street. It's about unpacking this shit that has been fed to us since we were kids. You know, I grew up in a really small mountain town. There were no Black people at all. I grew up in an all-white small mountain town, very progressive family, but we didn't talk about this stuff, right? So I had a very late awakening as an adult, where I went, shit, this is, it hit me. It hit me in a way that makes me emotional to talk about But it's about we have got to do the work. We've got to own our privilege. We have got to do more as white people.
Well, I definitely commend you on that because, it's funny. I have there's another podcast I do with a couple of friends one of them's in the Bronx, and then another one used to be in Harlem, but now he's in California for the time being. But we had a conversation similar as far as just kind of talking about our experiences with racism, and it was based on it's called the Music Buds, whoever's interested, but we were reviewing a spoken word project called Level with Brandon Leak, who won America's Got Talent in I think it was 2020, and Black Chakra. They did a 9-track spoken word poetry about racism and from like inheritance, rage, love, empathy, rich man, poor man. Very powerful. So if you get the chance, check that out.
Damn.
I think something you would definitely connect with.
Oh, I'd love to hear that.
Yeah, it might even help with conversation pieces too, because these are two intelligent African American males doing amazing poetry. It's really great stuff.
I love it.
But I definitely commend you in that, and then also just putting in music too. Because I think I always find this interesting web of being an artist, and you have your fans, which you appreciate, but then sometimes you have these hard conversations that you're passionate about and you want to get out into your music. Not all of your fans may not be with you on that, and then not all of not all the people you work with may be on that, but you believe in this, and you want to have this connected, So I find that to be a very interesting part in being a musician. I feel like a lot of people in 2020 experience that, even talking to artists of color, kind of going through just like all this crazy stuff, and then just seeing these perspectives and like, oh my gosh, like that's really what you think, so I just think it's a very daring thing. It's one thing to have like I accept my privilege, but it's another to really educate and to actually like be an advocate for it in the way you are. So I appreciate that personally. So
thank you so much. That means a lot. I mean, it's interesting you say that because there was a show that I recently, and I actually lately have been playing that song on purpose in places where I know people are going to be uncomfortable. And I think part of the reason I wrote this song is because I was kind of starting to get sick of my own voice. There's actually a line in there like, I strum for my ego and sing about my pains, but I'm privileged in so many ways. I just started getting sick of like me. And I feel like, yes, we as artists, part of our job is not only to sing about stuff that's happening in here that can be relatable to other people, but to be a voice, right? To be a voice of an activist, essentially. And so I played that song recently at a wine gig in Thousand Oaks, and there were a lot of people that were uncomfortable. I actually had 3 people leave. And when I introduced the song, I was like, I don't know what came over me, but I said something like, look, I actually really hope this song makes you uncomfortable, and I hope it makes you think about something, because that's what's part of it is the ignorance that I feel like a lot of, color blindness and that bullshit is like, we need to wake up from that. That's toxic.
Yeah. It's like, come get some truth. Dude, have a seat, come get some truth.
Yeah, and some people can't handle it, and some people don't want to. Some people just don't want to handle it.
Yeah.
And so I did have some people leave, and I felt proud, honestly.
Yeah. I mean, you're posing, you're kind of challenging their intellect and how the way they think, and and I think that's a very positive thing.
I agree. You gotta challenge people.
Yeah. Tell me about your experience as far as like recording, mixing your album, producing your album. I mean, that is that can be a large feat. I've done it before in a couple of my projects, but for something as intricate, super intricate, I mean, that could be like, oh my God, does it sound good?
Oh,
or just
dude.
like just the entire full circle artist experience, which I think is amazing that we can do in today's time frame, where as far as like, I don't need a label, I can just make the music and produce it.
Right.
But how was that experience for you for this project?
Well, it was actually good. I felt like I was tapping into something sonically that I have not been able to tap into before, and I don't know exactly what that was. I think I was just in the mixing sonic zone, and I did ask for feedback. I had some close friends that I respect, that are producers and mixing engineers and songwriters, listen. And my partner, who is not a musician but a writer, and she's added her feedback in there. And I took little bits and pieces of feedback, and it was actually really fun. I love it. Like, I love mixing and producing. It's like my playground. It's my happy place. I just love it. So it wasn't like too much of a headache until I started to get too in my head about it. I couldn't stop listening in certain different speakers. What does this sound like on the iPhone? What is this? How that whole game goes.
Oh, yeah.
I gotta listen on my shitty Prius stereo and then compare it to my iPhone mono stereo, and like, oh no, the horn is popping out here. You just get like real heady, and then you just have to surrender at some point. And I have this conversation with my filmmaker friend all the time about like getting something into the world. At some point, you just have to let go of your baby.
Yes.
It's
like a leaving Cleve as an artist, right?
Yeah, dude, for sure.
Yeah,
you have to let that baby free. You know?
I completely agree. Yeah, because to me, it's almost like working on a test, and then when the teacher says pencils down, it's like, I don't really do you fine, So it's yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. This is like, maybe I should re-record. No, I don't want to re-record it, because I feel like the more I take her with it, the more it's just going to crumble, and it's...
God. And sometimes the raw, like, messy shit in a recording is the special sauce. So like, if you get, in my opinion, as far as what I'm doing in the folk world, if something's too overproduced and clean, I'm just out. Like, I can't, it takes me out of the experience. So
I feel like with blues music.
Yes. Oh my God. 100%. You listen to like old Skip James albums and like Son House, and you're just like, oh God, you can hear that squeak in the guitar, and it like sucks you in, right? So I feel like there's something to be said about doing home recordings. Like, oh shit, I left the fan on this one song. Wait, the frequency's working. It's adding some space. Or like, my dog is. There was one time where Murphy, my basset hound, was like lapping up water in beat.
Oh wow!
like 4/4, dude. Like 4/4 time. Like. And I was like, should I keep that in and use that somewhere? So listen for a basset hound drinking water.
This analogy around it. It's because he's taking the water of life.
Yeah. It's like some Wizard of Oz shit. You know how there's like, you have to look for weird things like, oh, did you hear there's a munchkin that hung itself in the Wizard of Oz? Now it's like, did you hear there's a basset hound drinking water in Kisbee Ring at 990 in Wishingwell?
Oh man, that's great. That's great.
Yeah.
I guess one of the last questions I had for you was, for someone listening to it, what would you say as far as like some takeaways that you want the listener to get from your project? Because it sounds like you have a lot. You have a lot put into the project, a lot of really important conversations. What would you like the listener to take away, if anything?
Wow, that's a really good question. There's a few different places my mind went. One was, I hope that people are inspired, creatively inspired to do their own producing and to do their to get in there with figuring out like layers and sonic like the sonic blankets of a song, you know, just like how to like stack up those beautiful sonic layers, right? So I hope that it creates some sort of inspiration and curiosity. And then I also hope that people, you know, are able to be relating to the lyrics. I hope that I hope that I always love it when I get an email from a fan that's like, this song brought me light today, or it got me out of a dark place, and I felt like I was able to just get through my day because I listened to this song. Wow. I mean, that's like any artist. Like I can die happy if I get emails like that. So I hope that it's inspiring, uplifting, relatable, knowing that you're not alone. Like we all struggle. I like to write lyrics that are not super on the nose because I want people to be able to find their own story in my lyrics. And so that's something that I really hope happens.
Awesome. Well, Abby Posner, it's been a great time speaking with you here, and congratulations on this project. Your baby is about to be presented to the world here pretty soon. So
she's free. She's free.
Really exciting stuff there. So thank you so much for being on the show. Definitely appreciate it.
Thank you. This has been a pleasure. It really has. I appreciate you so much, and it really authentic and cool questions. Thank you for having me on.
Oh, of course. Well, there you have it, folks. This is Jerrell Powell here on the 440 Guitar Podcast. We'll jam again soon, and have a good day.